Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Michael's Record Collection, where we talk about great music with the people who make it and the people who love it. I'm your host, Michael Citro, and I'm really excited to be joined once again by Maiah Wynne. Maiah, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again.
I've been enjoying, as I just talked to you a little bit before we started recording, been enjoying your new debut solo album, Out of the Dark. This is a very personal record for you. I can't wait to get into some of the ins and outs of making it and the songs themselves. But before we jump into that, I mean, the last time you and I spoke, we talked about this Envy of None album that you were on. And I just wanted to know how, if at all, your life has changed since that came out.
I've definitely grown a lot since that record came out, and obviously just the experience of releasing music with those guys has been really amazing, and it's opened a lot of doors and opportunities. And it's just been amazing to connect with that community. Obviously, Alex has an incredible fan base, but also Andy um, so it's just been a really amazing experience. I've just like grown a lot since then in my own music, and on my own journey. And I feel like I don't know, maybe my brain has developed more, as time goes on. So I definitely feel like I've grown a lot as a person, but also as an artist. And I've had the chance to really experience more of the industry since then.
Okay, what is next on the Envy of None front?
We are releasing another album, and that comes out in February. I don't think I have the exact release date yet, but I'm very excited about that. We just released the second single off of that upcoming record, called Under the Stars. And yeah, I'm very excited for this record. We've been working on it for a while now, and it feels like we've grown as a group, and it's been very exciting to kind of, I think we've pushed ourselves a little bit more on this one and explored some new territory, and that's been really fun and exciting. And but it still feels like us, and it's very eclectic, much like the first record.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to hear the whole thing, and that's definitely an auto buy for me. So I want to
Yay!
make sure that you got a chance to plug that and talk about that a little bit because a lot of people will be interested in that. And I want to jump right into your album because it's I think it's one of these albums that it's if you're an Envy of None fan, this isn't necessarily Envy of None by any means, but I think there's so much of you wrapped up in both projects. I think that Envy of None fans will like this as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. Especially, there's um like the song "What a Shame" definitely has a crossover with some of the Envy of None songs, and
Mhm.
my voice is definitely in both of these projects. So I think there'll be at least a couple songs in there that fans of Envy of None will enjoy.
Absolutely. So this album now I have a release date of November 21st. Is that out on digital and CD already or just digital?
Yes, both CD and digital, and soon we will have vinyl as well. I'm still figuring out that side of things. Vinyl is expensive, but like what I want to do is the big, fold out with the
Oh
big
yeah.
insert and all that stuff, but we'll see what's in the budget.
Well, I hope you get to do that. That's great because I have a
Thank
turntable
you.
and I'm very excited about the prospect of having these songs on vinyl as well. So
Yeah.
we'll talk a little bit about where people can get this a little later. But why don't we talk about this because in this album you're all over the place. You play guitar, bass, keys, piano, hammered dulcimer, synthesizer, drums, harpsichord, electric ukulele, banjo, bouzouki, percussion, something called a saz that I had to look up because I didn't know what that was. And you wrote the songs and produced it, and you did a bit of the mixing as well. This is truly a Maiah Wynne project.
Yeah. It definitely was. I feel very proud to talk about all of the work that I did on this album. Of course, I had help from some very talented artists along the way. Despite all of the instruments I played, I also had drummers,
Mhm.
cellists, guitar players, percussionists, and bass players adding, you know, much better tracks than what I did on my own, or filling in those gaps and adding magic on top of everything. And but I do feel very proud of all of the work that I've done on this record, and I spent hundreds of hours editing and recording, and I think people often don't realize how much time editing sessions takes with songs, especially songs where you have a lot of acoustic instruments. You record 10 takes of a guitar and you spend, 2 days editing those 10 takes down into this perfect take that's, perfectly aligned with the tempo, and you carve out all those, pieces you don't want or any mistakes, and make it as perfect as you can. And there's of course there's fast ways to do that with synthesized instruments, and you can do it instantaneously now with AI, but this was very there's a lot of acoustic instruments on this record, and I spent a lot of meticulous hours editing and getting everything exactly how I wanted it. And so I do feel very proud of the work that I put into this record, but also very grateful for everybody else who helped bring it across the finish line and added their magic to it as well.
Yes, I didn't mean to imply that you played everything, but you kind of do play everything, but you have also have
Yeah.
help from other musicians. In fact, I think there's probably not a cellist in the Portland area that's not on this record.
Probably not. I did employ a lot of cellists for this record. It's an instrument I wish I could play, but I don't. I play a lot of instruments, like you were saying, and I play a lot of instruments on this record, but cello is one I've always loved, and I just haven't been able to figure out yet.
But I bet you've tried.
Yes, I have tried. I still plan to learn. I've got a plan to learn with from one of my cellist friends. We're gonna trade knowledge.
Well, it sounds like that's one thing that you really enjoy is learning because you've also dabbled in the video world now, and you're starring in your videos and all of these things, being involved in the artwork and design and that kind of thing. All of this is it takes practice. It takes time to learn how to do all this stuff. So this must be a labor of love for you.
It definitely is. But like you said, I do love learning, and this process, I think I've found learning to be a source of empowerment too. The more that I learn, the more capable I feel. And I've become really addicted to that feeling of feeling capable. Like, wow, I can do so many things. Look at all these things I can do. And there's something really exciting about that. And so I've been really enjoying that process of learning new skills. And when there's something that I think, man, I really wish I could make that kind of video or create that kind of song now, instead of thinking, I wish I could do that, but I can't. It's, oh, I wish I could do that. I should learn how to do that. And it might not be perfect, and I'm learning along the way and making lots of mistakes, but there's something so exciting and fulfilling about that. I think this project was a reflection of that too. It's like I know it's not perfect, and at some point I'll look back and think, oh, I could have done all these other things differently, but for right now, I feel so satisfied with this album because I did it, myself, and then I learned all these things along the way, and anything that isn't exactly necessarily how I heard it in my head, I have the satisfaction of knowing that I tried.
I will say this: I don't know Alex Lifeson. I've never met Alex. I haven't talked to him. And it's always dangerous to kind of imagine what people would say. But my opinion of from what I've read from Alex talking about you and your work on Envy of None, is that you probably didn't necessarily need to ask him to be on this record, though he probably wanted to be on this record.
I I think so. I think I feel so grateful because we've reached this point in our friendship where we just send each other music, and if there's tracks. I think I sent him a bunch and I was like, if there's any on here that you feel inspired to add stuff to, I would love that. And he chose a few tracks and that was such an honor. And he'll send me stuff and I'll add vocals to it outside of Envy of None. And it's so fun to be at that point in our friendship where we can just share music and I feel that way about Andy and Alf as well. It's just been really fun to become collaborators on that level. And it's just really exciting. I send him everything now.
I don't blame you. That's a pretty good person to have some input from. So the press kit says that this album touches on themes of hope, failure, and triumph, joy and sadness, pain and growth. But there's really a darker undertone to this album in some ways, and it's the story of you over the course of a decade, basically. This album, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of your journey that started out in kind of a bad place. And I don't want to read stuff from the press kit about it. I'd like to get it in your words. What would you tell people on this program, experiencing this for the first time? What would you say is the background of this?
I think, as you said, it really is a part of my journey over the last 10 years. And originally, the album was actually 22 songs, and I split it into two albums. And this, Out of the Dark, is really the it is the trials and it is the difficult part of that journey. There's still hope in there, and there's still light in some of those songs, and I wanted there to still have this feeling of hope at the end of it. But it really is a very cohesive story of that struggle over the last 10 years. And I went through some very difficult things, and um, I've not always been the best at actually articulating those things through words, but through music. That has been, for as long as I can remember, my way of processing complex emotions and difficulties and struggles. And so over the last 10 years, I've written songs about this journey that I was on. And I took all of the songs that felt the most connected to that story and I put them on one record. And that's what this album is. And um, I feel grateful now that I'm on the other side of this trauma. But it definitely I went through a very abusive situation for a very long time. And unfortunately, that's not uncommon. A lot of people struggle with these similar things, and without going into details about these things, I just think it's important for people to have music that they can connect to, something that gives them hope, something that shows them they're not alone in these experiences. And I that's been my hope with this record, is connecting to other people who need to hear these things as well.
I was interested because the first track, "Come On," is a song that you wrote when you were 16 years old and just before you left home.
Mhm.
And I wonder, how long was it before you felt comfortable sort of confronting your trauma and what you'd been through?
A long time. I would say just recently I've finally gotten to that point. It's what I went through was very complicated, and that was part of it. There was a lot of manipulation and a lot of confusion in my head because it started from such a young age, and being a kid going through those things and kind of developing and growing as a person while experiencing that kind of trauma. It really left me very confused and unsure of myself, and it took me a long time to kind of untangle those ties inside of me, and I still think I'm in that process of understanding everything and trying to make sense of it and grow from it. But it took me a long time. So even though it's been a long journey from some of the first songs that I wrote on this record, in a way, it feels like I just closed that chapter of the book, and I don't know, it just feels very cathartic in a way to kind of have all of these pieces in one place and to be able to kind of have this album as a closed chapter at this point.
Yeah, that was my next question, was, how much how therapeutic was making this record?
Very therapeutic. I think if I didn't have music along the way, um, it would be a very different story. And I think for so many people who look to the arts as a way to process, music was my therapy for a very long time. Obviously, getting actual therapy was important as well. But I'm a strong believer in the arts as a means to help people process trauma and heal from trauma, um, and so I'm very grateful that I had this album to be able to help me process and find my way through it.
I'm glad to. I agree with you. I think music is an insanely therapeutic thing in terms of whether you're making it or just listening to it. I know it helped me as a listener and appreciator of music. Certain albums helped me get through some difficult times. So I'm glad that this was therapeutic for you. Um, so tell me a little bit about this song. Come on, you, as I said, you wrote it when you were 16. Did you have any idea this thing would still be kicking around in your head all these years later?
I didn't, but I'm really grateful that it has stuck. I've written a lot of songs, hundreds of songs, but there are some songs that have just stuck, for one reason or another, and this is one of those. And um, I think it really was kind of the beginning of that journey, as difficult as that journey was. I wrote that song at the time that I was leaving home, and um, it it's interesting because the bridge I actually added while I was working on this record in the last couple years, and so it's like I had this added piece to that song that with the perspective that I have now. And so it's almost like two different voices in that song now. I have 16-year-old me and 26-year-old me in the same song. And um it's such a weird full circle moment. So it's yeah, it's kind of fun.
It's like it's like you're having a conversation with yourself, your older and younger self, uh, sort of meeting in the middle all these years later. It's interesting. The first two songs are, I hesitate to say they're Pink Floydish, but they kind of had that same sort of big atmosphere. It's kind of hard to explain, but it has a big atmosphere. It's cinematic, I think, is a good word. I think these are songs that are a little bit more, they're a little slower, they're a little bit more ballady, they're a little somber at times, but they have that just that emotional impact and that big sort of like you're in a room and you're surrounded by this music. I don't know. I'm explaining it really poorly, but I hope I'm connecting with it correctly on some level.
I think that was perfect. Yeah, it's very there's a lot of layers and it's very cinematic and especially with the strings and a lot of the guitar layers that both Alex and my guitarist Brooks added. Like in Come On, there's a lot of atmosphere with those guitars. Then you have the strings and then All Too Much. My friend Bethany, she did a beautiful cello arrangement for that song and it really does. I'm a big fan of cinematic tracks. I love a good sad song. So I definitely leaned into that for for both of those tracks.
Yeah. The track two, All Too Much, has so it's this piano based. It's almost kind of sounds like a waltz underlying everything. Is that kind of what you were going for there?
Yeah, I love a waltz too. I I think especially a somber waltz, there's something about that and that 3/4 timing that always gets me and combined with, yeah, with the strings, it felt right for that song.
Yeah, somber waltz is like Tom Traubert's blues. Uh,
Yeah.
the song "What a Shame" is like you brought this up earlier. It's rockier than the first two. Maybe it's not fast paced, but it's heavier, and it's got maybe a little bit of an industrial flavor to it. And you tell me about the screams. You performed screams on this song behind the chorus toward the end. Um, it's a song about objectifying women, and I was wondering too. I already asked you a question. I'll ask you a second one before you even answer it. Was this related to something that happened to you during your? Because I know you'd kind of done some acting and that kind of thing.
Mm. In a way, yes. I think part of what I went through, I was heavily manipulated by somebody in industry, and it wasn't somebody even in hindsight who had a lot of influence, but for me as a kid, I saw him as somebody with a lot of influence, um and going through that kind of manipulation, I think, and also just working in the industry, there are unfortunately so many sides to the industry that can be exploitive. Um, and there's this awful double-edged sword of kids who go through the industry who are exploited at young ages, but then as they get older, they're sort of discarded, and it's just such a weird um, thing that happens. And so I was feeling a lot of that and putting a lot of that into that song, and just my frustration with how people are treated in that weird spotlight. Um and it really is, it's such a strange feeling on the other side of that to feel like you kind of feel like a piece of meat sometimes, and then you're also incredibly subject to criticism at the same time. It's such a weird combination, that heavy amount of criticism combined with the exploitation is such a weird feeling. And so I was trying to kind of channel that
Mhm.
duality in that song.
And the the manipulative bit of it about you know sort of gaslighting the person and saying you're hey, this is a compliment for you to be being noticed and you should be more appreciative of this treatment that you're getting while you're not being treated very well.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the industry, when people start to talk about their negative experiences. Obviously, I'm not nearly to the level of people like Chapo Roan, for example, but when people start to express their negative experiences with the industry or with fame, a common response is, oh, you asked for this, you should be grateful for your success, how dare you complain? Because there's this perceived notion of like, you're you're succeeding, you're winning at life, therefore you should only be grateful, and it must only be a good thing. But it really is. It's such a weird industry, and unfortunately there's a lot of negative experiences within that and exploitation, and but yeah, it makes it, I think, difficult for people to often even talk about it because there's this perception that they should just be grateful for it. Yeah.
When were these two? When was all too much? When did you write that one?
That one I wrote, I think I was around 22 when I wrote All Too Much. So it's kind of in the middle of that journey.
And then what a shame came later, or between the first two songs.
What a Shame was around that same time when I think I was around 20, 21 or 22 when I wrote What a Shame. And What a Shame I wrote pretty quickly, and it was on this monologue synth that I had. Um, and I would just sit and noodle on that and find weird samples, and that kind of driving distorted bass thing in What a Shame was on that monologue synth that I was playing around with.
Tell me about the screams. How did you feel like I need a scream in here?
I will admit I did scream in that track, but I have a friend, Kendra, who's excellent at screaming. So her screams are also in that. Um, and we actually tracked screams as a group for the first Envy of None record, Dog's Life. And you can't really hear them because that song is so just thick and very full. And I always wanted the screams louder. And I was like, dang, I just like we have these excellent screams that we recorded together, and this was a song where I was like, this is what I'm gonna use those screams for, because it felt so cathartic, and like, having those screams in there, it just, I feel like it tied all of that emotion together. I let myself be angry, and I also, you know I did scream, and I also used Candra's screams because she has an excellent scream.
Now, have you done scream therapy? Is that part of the therapy you've ever done before?
I've never done scream therapy, although that sounds pretty fun. That sounds a little hard on the voice, though. I'm still pretty careful about like
Yeah,
vocal fatigue.
John Lennon was into that for a while.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Then some of the songs that are on this, people that have followed you on your YouTube channel or have listened to your Spotify songs, or Title in my case, because I got off Spotify because Title pays a little bit, tiny bit more than
Excellent,
Spotify.
yes.
Um, some of those songs made it onto this album. Some of the ones that you previously released. One of them is Sleep. What did you do differently for the album version of Sleep than what you had previously brought to the table?
So for Sleep, I retracked the vocals, and then I added some effects, and then I mixed it. I remixed the whole thing myself. And part of it was taking back a little bit of my own ownership of all of these songs. You know, it was one that I wanted to have on the record, um, but I also wanted it to feel more like it was my own. Because I don't know, it was kind of important with this record specifically to feel like this is mine and I did this. And so part of my motivation for doing that was simply just to feel like, okay, that's mine. That's my work and it's my song. Um, but also, you know, it was nice to revisit and retrack those vocals, um, because I do, compared to the early release of that song, you can definitely hear my my voice is more mature,
Mhm.
um, which I think gives it a different feeling. But yeah, so that's the main difference.
We I mentioned how personal this album was for you. Was there ever a time when you thought maybe this is too personal to put out?
Um, no, but only because I've always been a fan of like deep conversations and emotional vulnerability. I guess where most people have that filter of like, oh, this is too, you know, personal to talk about. I don't, and I've never had that filter. So I'm a big fan of like personal conversations with people. And when I find other people who are like that, we just really hit it off. But like, yeah, I think that thought really never crossed my mind.
Well, I'm glad it didn't because it's out there now. Which brings us to the next song, which also was previously released, was "Fearless Girl." And one of the things that I didn't have the lyric sheet before, and just listening to it, and I didn't really think too hard about the lyrics, but going through this, I wanted to make sure that I caught some of the themes that you were talking about, and we'll get into some of that in a bit. But "Fearless Girl," what I enjoyed was there was this, and I wanted to know if it was intentional. There's the line, "Every breath I take and every move I make," seems to be an intentional reference to the Police song, which is about stalking. Is Was that done intentionally by you?
Yes, yes. I think that's an excellent song, and the discourse around that song I've always found really intriguing that so many people take it as this romance song, but in reality it really is it's about stalking and it's quite creepy and I guess for as many times as I've listened to that song and contemplated kind of the softening of male stalking in society and how we kind of accept it as almost romantic at times. Even in media and films and television, it's often depicted as like this, it's almost chivalrous or admirable when a man doesn't take no for an answer and keeps
Say
pursuing the
anything. You're
woman.
out there with the
Yeah,
boombox and the long arms.
exactly.
It's a little bit of a
Yeah,
violation.
exactly. So I've been contemplating that a lot and you know, I hadn't heard a lot of songs from the opposite perspective of what it feels like to be on the other side of that. So it definitely it was very intentional.
How did you envision this song differently than the previous versions that we've heard?
This was the same thing, you know, for the most part, it was I re-recorded some of the vocal parts and some of the tracks to make it 100% my own work, and something that I could say this is mine. This one, I think the differences are a little less noticeable because the original one was a lot of my work to begin with, the edit of the strings and a lot of the instrumentation. Um, but it was just taking it that one step further of like, okay, now it's 100% mine and and I can feel that sense of satisfaction in it. But this one's the differences are a little less noticeable, but some of the vocal parts and the drums and um some of the instrument tracks are slightly different.
Hmm. Speaking of songs we've heard before, the sixth song is Old Strings, and it's this is one that Envy of None fans will know, but not like this. This is a very different version of Old Strings, and in fact, it's super speeded up from the one that's on Envy of None, and it's got almost a bit of a Cajun flavor, a Cajun Zydeco flavor. Got some banjos going on, some mandola. Um, Alex played the banjo and the mandola on this, Alex Lifeson. And what did he think of the arrangement? Or was, first of all, tell me, was this like how you originally envisioned the song and then it changed for Envy of None? Or did it become this because you had a different thing you wanted to say with this song?
So this was originally how the song was. I had written it on a very old dulcimer. Um, and it kind of had this jangly and almost frantic energy in the verses. Um, and the feeling that I was having when I was writing it was this sort of anxiety about getting older and um, not wanting to come to terms with that and the realities of time passing. Um, and so there's this feeling of like trying to run away from that and running away from that reality. Um, and so it always kind of had this frenetic, old, jangly instrument, feeling. And I had electric guitars in the demo and a lot of dulcimers. And when I sent it to the guys, I thought they would like it because it was kind of fast paced and there were electric guitars. And I was thinking they would take the dulcimers out of it and just replace it with more electric guitars and things. Um, but if you mute all of the drums and you just keep my synths and my vocals in there, it's pretty close to how it ended up on the Envy of None record. So I think that's kind of what they did was they're like, okay, what do we have here? They muted the drums and once they heard it with just my vocals and the synths, they were like, oh, this is cool and very different vibe. And I'm really happy they did that because it really is a beautiful track. And I love where it ended up on the Envy of None record, and I wouldn't change that at all. I think it's beautiful, and I love that they opened it up and just highlighted that the vocal layers and the harmonies and this openness. And so it's weird when you're listening to the two versions to think that it's the same tempo,
Mm,
but it's really just that the rhythm is double timed, and so it has this frenetic energy,
yeah.
but it's like the core pieces are almost identical. The vocal is actually exactly the same.
That's surprising because it does seem slower on the Envy of None record.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
it's
amazing.
weird.
But
But
that's
yeah, originally I'd sent it and Alex had recorded. Alex, that's what I love Alex. I love about Alex is he's just on board with anything. So I sent it and Alex had already recorded like banjo, mandola, and acoustic guitars and sent him back. And I was like, this is awesome. And then Andy was like, I don't know, maybe if we do this other direction, which ended up being fantastic, and we re-recorded guitars and other things for that version. But I was like, I really want to do something with this other version because it's really cool and it's really different. And I didn't want those awesome, mandola and banjo takes to go to waste.
not even mandolin, mandala. It's
Yeah.
most people haven't even heard of that.
Yeah.
What's the
Yeah,
difference
it's
between a
awesome.
mandala and a mandolin?
So a mandola is sort of like an octave mandolin. It's much bigger and it has a lower tone, but it still has the eight strings, the doubled, essentially four strings, like a mandolin. Um, I'm not exactly sure the difference between an octave mandolin and a mandola. I think those are basically the same, and they're very suspiciously close to a bouzouki. Those three instruments, I feel like, are basically the same thing.
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean that way you get to put more instruments on the credits.
Exactly. That's that's what counts.
They're all over the place. All right.
Yeah.
Inside Your Head is a song. I really like the tempo changes in this one with the darker verses and the lighter chorus play very interestingly against one another. And again, curious as to where this came in terms of when you wrote it, and and is this something that you were sort of looking inward for, or talking to someone else going through the same things you had been going through?
This one's kind of a little bit of an outlier on the record. I wrote this one when I was 16 or 17. I remember it was around the time I was starting to play some of my first shows in coffee shops, um and I was listening to a lot of Florence and the Machine. I was
Yeah.
really into the like haunting, dramatic stuff. Lorde was really popular at the time, and like I think I really wanted to lean into that like drama for this song. But it was also just about seeing somebody else take their own difficulties and turn that into art and turn that into beauty, and really admiring that in somebody else, and wanting to be able to do the same thing. And so it still felt like it was relevant to all of it because it was like seeing somebody else who was able to take their pain and turn that into something beautiful. And eventually, in a weird full circle way, I was doing that with the album. So it felt like it fit.
Yeah. And that it dovetails into the next song, Work of Art, because this song here too is about, and I like this idea about how even our sort of our broken parts of ourselves are still who we are at our core, and they can be viewed in positive ways. This is a theme that you use throughout the album.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really happy to put this track on this record because I wanted something more positive. Um, but this song is one that I wrote more recently. It came towards the end of that journey, and feeling this release and this excitement to take all of these pieces and make something out of it. And there's that art form, I think it's called kintsugi, where they take broken pottery and refill the cracks with gold, and it's considered more beautiful after it's been broken,
Mm.
um, and put back together. And I love that idea. I love that metaphor, and I was leaning into that when writing this song. But there's also a lot of weirdly, despite its positive tone, there's a lot of anger that I was processing in that song.
Yeah.
And it was allowing myself to feel angry, and that anger could be sort of this alchemy for getting myself into a better place, and that I needed to let myself feel a little bit angry in order to like move forward. I think I was very timid for a very long time, and I didn't really let myself get angry. And like that was like the part of my journey of like learning, okay, I can be a little bit angry. It's okay. And like sometimes anger doesn't always need to be a source of like destruction. It can be a source of healing. And there's some percussion in the bridge that sounds like broken glass, and that's because it is broken glass. And I was in a rage room and I brought a recorder and I recorded me breaking glass, and so that was part of that song and part of that like I don't know, all of that emotional journey.
Don't let the fire go out, let it rage, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. It's probably the catchiest song and the most sort of pop friendly song on the album, surprisingly
Yeah.
based on being an angry song.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very if like weird it's like it's the side of anger that's not destructive in a weird way. I don't know. But it is, it's like happy and positive and hopeful. It's hopeful anger.
It's anger with a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Where the grass is green. Tell me, where is the grass green for you?
That is a good question. I think I'm still finding that, but it's definitely greener where I am now. And I wrote that towards the end. That was another later song. And that was actually right before I left. I was living in Oregon at the time, and I finally like moved out and moved to California, and like I've been in my own space for the first time, and like really pushing myself out of that situation. Um, and that song was really me processing that I was ready to do that and I was ready to get away from everything and I was ready to kind of fly away from it all. And it starts out with me saying, I want to run. And
Mhm.
then it ends with me saying, now I will run, and it's like that. I don't know, I was pumping myself up.
Well, that's good too, because it's interesting because I'm, knowing the backstory from the press kit, I wondered if this was one of those that you had written younger when you were contemplating, leaving home, and it's like the opposite end of the whole journey.
Yeah, yeah. Weirdly, it starts with me running away from home, which unfortunately it was me running into that sort of bad situation. And so, but I was a kid and I didn't know any better. And now, where the grass is green is me finally understanding that where I thought I was going is not where I ended up, and it was time for me to kind of get out of that.
Understood. Okay, the title track "Out of the Dark" is one of my favorites on the record. It's you. First of all, there are three drummers, four including you on this, credited. Is everybody just playing a different part? I mean, it doesn't even sound like there's tons of drumming going on, but there's a lot of drummers.
There are so it getting the drums right on that song was a bit of a journey. I first sent it to Elliot, who plays drums on a few tracks on the album. Um, and he had a very modern approach, which I really liked for like it comes in, especially on that second verse where you have that rhythm coming in. Um, but overall, I wanted it to feel a little bit more acoustic and have a more nostalgic feeling. And I had David Steinberg had recorded some stuff, but it didn't quite have the full cinematic feel that I was looking for. And then finally I went to the studio and I recorded with Tyrone Hendricks, and he's a phenomenal drummer, fantastic. And all of those pieces together ended up being what I wanted, but it was like individually it was like it wasn't quite there, but all together. And then I originally in the demo, I had recorded some drums and put some, and some of that also ended up in there. So it's like a weird combination of like a lot of pieces, but at the end, I was really happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, you if you look at the credits, you'll think this would be a very busy song. But
Yeah.
it's not. There's a lot of space in this song, a lot of atmosphere, and you also have two cellists, of course,
Yes.
in this as
Yes.
well. Tonally, this is kind of similar to the first couple of tracks. It starts out like it's going to be a bit of a downer of a song, but it's actually quite uplifting and full of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of why it's the title track of the record. I wanted to leave people with a feeling of hope, and this song was me finally having like compassion for younger me and like wanting to reach out to her and for younger me to know that everything was going to be okay, and I think so many people need to hear that, and just a reminder to keep going. And I always want to leave people with hope, even when I'm, writing a really sad song.
Yeah. And you did a very interesting video for this, and you've got water raining down, you've got underwater scenes. It looked like a very uncomfortable shoot for you.
It was so uncomfortable. I was miserable filming that video, but I'm so happy with how it turned out. And, um, all the people that helped bring that video to fruition. But it was very DIY. We used a hose in the backyard for the rain, which was very cold, and we're, out at like 2 in the morning to make sure it was really dark. And I'm sure the neighbors were just confused.
And is
Um,
some of that backed up and reversed so that the rain is going up at some points in that?
yes, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you noticed that. I edited that video, so yes,
Very cool effect.
yeah, I wanted to kind of it was really fun working on that and working on the edit to kind of I had these two scenes that I had filmed, and one was the rain and the other was the underwater portion, which was we filmed in a pool when we were filming and doing photos for the album artwork,
Hmm.
which is all me actually underwater. Um, talented like graphic artist Becca Bjork, she kind of added these wings. I actually had butterfly wings on me under the water, but they were very floppy and didn't look as spectacular as Becca made them look in the photographs. But I wanted to film this part of the music video while we were in the pool, and that was also very miserable. I was very afraid of being underwater, so I had to work through that to be underwater for like 8 hours for 2 days straight. And um, it was, yeah, I was a wrinkly little raisin by the end of all of that and just
I'll bet.
miserable and sad and wet, like a wet puppy. But I was very, very happy how it turned out. And I didn't have that middle scene of me starting to go under the water. And so I filmed that myself recently in my bathtub. And I I'm learning again, like learning throughout this process, learning some cinematography and color correction and all these other things. And so I was really happy with that I got something that was actually usable for that video.
And it's, I think it's just a brilliant video. It's like all these water scenes. You got the water coming down on you, underwater. It's all very dark. And then in the hopeful part of the song, you break the surface. Now you're on the shore in daylight. Um, it really works well. And just I'm watching this thing knowing that it probably took you hours underwater doing this, but you're still able to stay, like you keep that emotion on your face. It's I thought it was an amazing acting job, because to put up with what you put up with for those 2 days and to still be able to get the shots you want, that's pretty amazing. I bet there are a lot of people that do act for a living professionally, make a lot of money, that wouldn't have done that.
Thank you. It was very hard. There's a lot of shots that I couldn't use because you could tell how miserable it was. A lot of behind the scenes would be sad and shivering and unhappy, but I that means a lot. I definitely put a lot into it, so I appreciate that.
So tell me about the water metaphors throughout this album. There's a lot of things about drowning, about being underwater, about floating down the river, that kind of thing. How do you see water in terms of using it as cinematic language in music?
Yeah, I think it really does have a big theme in this record and I think I use water a lot in my music because it's such a flexible metaphor for so many different emotions and of course there's that feeling of being overwhelmed and you're being pulled under the water, but then also with work of art it was sort of like, okay, you've jumped ship and now you're floating down the river, but you feel free, and it's like it's such a great and vast and diverse source for metaphors. So I feel like I've definitely used that a lot for a lot of different songs, and if on this record especially, it's been an important one.
Does water have an important part in your life? Like, are you a surfer? Do you spend a lot of time by the water or in the water?
No, I've always had a fear of water. And when I was a kid, I failed the guppy swimming class
Oh no.
3 years in a row because I couldn't do it. I couldn't put my face under the water, and I had this fear, and I almost drowned as a kid, and so it was like this constant source of fear for me. And so I think in a weird way, I think that's why I reference it so often because it feels connected to a lot of those fears.
Mm.
Um, but in a really beautiful way, the process of filming that video and taking those underwater photos forced me to kind of work through that fear.
Hmm.
And again, it just feels like the perfect kind of, I don't know, irony and poetic irony. At the end of the day, it's like I had to work through all of that in order to create the art that I wanted to make.
Get that, facing your fears. You look, it's like double the therapy. You got through two different
Exactly.
things through this album.
Yeah, two for one deal is awesome.
That's great. A chance to say goodbye is the album closer. This is an album version of again another song that you had previously put out there, and it it bookends the album tonally very nicely with the opener "Come On," and to me, I mean, I don't know if it's exactly the same guitar pattern from "Come On," but it sounds the same to me. Is it
Mm.
exactly the same? It just sounds like it's been given a different treatment in production.
Yeah, I think it is a similar picking pattern. Different chords, but it is a similar picking pattern, and it does tonally, like the electric guitar and that style. I'm a big fan of that style of electric guitar and picking, with lots of reverb and I think I first got into that when I was listening to the band Daughter when I was around 16, and so it definitely influenced me a lot, and it definitely had that same treatment. But it is different. It's a different chord progression, but it has a very similar feel.
And is this a literal saying goodbye to a person? Is it a saying goodbye to the person you were and you're leaving behind? It works on both levels.
I think this one is more up for interpretation for me because it's, as you'll see on some platforms it shows it, but it's technically a bonus track, and it's not one that I think will be on the vinyl version. And it's not one that I necessarily saw as like this is definitely a part of the album. But when I was looking at the different bonus tracks I wanted to include on this record, this is the one that I chose, partially because tonally it fit with everything else, but also there is so much room for interpretation. And I've had so many people talk to me about this track in particular. Um, and it felt like a nice one to include. I think when I originally wrote it, it was actually for a film that was about a woman who was at the end of her life. Um, and I kind of was trying to step into her shoes when I wrote those lyrics. And so it has a very literal interpretation when you look at it from that perspective, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been so nice to connect with people who have connected with that song in their own lives in different ways and interpret it in different ways. And I think that that's a really cool thing. So that one I feel like is very, very open to any sort of interpretation.
Well, I'm glad that it's not more personal than what it sounds like, because based on knowing that you were in some dark places, you even talked in the press kit about having some suicidal thoughts. It
Mhm.
made me wonder if this was autobiographical, and it sounds like maybe not intentionally, but maybe somewhat subconsciously at some point you had some of these same thoughts.
Definitely. While this song in particular wasn't written with that in mind, I've definitely struggled with those feelings and those thoughts since part of where Out of the Dark came from. And so it definitely still felt topical to include on the record. And thankfully, that isn't where my head was at when I wrote that song. But, in reality, it is something that I have struggled with. And so many of the people that I love have struggled with. And it's still very topical.
Hmm. All right, so somebody buys this album and they listen to it start to finish. What is the message you want them to carry away from listening to Out of the Dark?
That if they've gone through anything similar, that they're not alone. Even if what they're going through is completely different, to know that they're not alone in those feelings, um, and that they can get through these difficulties, and there is that little bit of hope. And um, yeah, I think that's really the heart of it. And that end of Out of the Dark is you're not the only one, is just that chorus. I just want people to be able to connect with that music and to know that they're not alone.
So this thing came out November 21st. We're talking about it in mid-December. How have the responses been so far?
It's been so wonderful. Um, Especially on the music video for Out of the Dark, seeing those comments and the messages that I've received. People are so wonderful. I think that's something I continue to learn all the time, is just that people are lovely, and I feel so grateful that I get to create music and that the other side of that is just getting to connect with people. And that's such a blessing. And I love that so much. And people are so kind and so sweet and um, so vulnerable. I think that's something I'm very grateful about. Creating vulnerable m music allows other people to be vulnerable, and like the kinds of conversations I've had with people about very personal things and their own struggles. It's just been so beautiful, and I feel so grateful for that. And um, the response that people have had to it, it's just it's meant a lot to me. I cried a lot.
So obviously one of the things that you do, I mean, you perform. How close can you approximate what you put on the record when you do live performances? Obviously, if it's just a solo acoustic show, you can only do so much. Are there any plans to put together a band for some shows?
Yes, obviously cello is an instrument that I love to incorporate into my live shows when I can. Bethany will play live with me often. And I've been working on figuring out some tour dates, hopefully for the summer. And it'd be great to have Brooks on guitar and to have some percussion as well. Um, of course, in an ideal world, I a few years ago I had the chance to tour with Portland Cello Project, and that's like 12 cellos, a drummer, and a bass player, and some horns, and like my life was complete,
They have just
if I
enough
could,
cellos.
yeah.
They have just enough for you.
Exactly. If I could tour with them and some like background vocalists, oh my gosh, that would just I think I would go to heaven. But I think, you know, even with just me, Bethany, and Brooks, we're able to create a very full sound. And when it's just myself, I do percussion with my feet while I'm playing guitar and other instrumentation and singing. And sometimes I'll have some backing tracks for certain songs. So I still try to give a big variety in my solo shows. You get a lot of instrumentation. I'm constantly switching instruments and, heavier stuff, upbeat stuff, fast-paced stuff. It's not all sad. And I do love to do some rock music and throw some heavier stuff in there and also some very sweet, uplifting stuff as well. So if you do happen to see me live, it will be a great variety.
Maya, what's the best place for people to get this? Obviously, your Bandcamp is a good place for people to get the digital version, and of course, Bandcamp Friday it helps you quite a bit.
Yes, Bandcamp is lovely. And if you're looking for a platform to really support artists and make sure that your money is going to the artists, Bandcamp is a great place to do that. Or if you'd like a physical copy, I have those available through my website. Um, or if you'd like to order a vinyl, I will have that available soon, and I'm very excited about that. So,
Well,
yeah,
you got to tell people your website is maiahwynne.com, right?
that's right. Thank you very much. And my name is spelled Maiahwynne.
Yeah,
That's me.
gotta let people know. Where else can people find you online? Obviously, you got your YouTube channel.
Yes, YouTube, if you want to see lots of covers. Patreon is if you want lots of behind the scenes stuff and exclusive content, my Patreon is a great place to go. Anywhere from $1 a month or more gets you access to a lot of stuff. And that's been honestly a huge thing for me. I was just, I don't know, I was just watching or reading an article about a successful singer who just had to fund her tour with OnlyFans. And that made me very sad
Mm.
because we're in this state in the industry where it's so hard to fund tours and it's so hard to like make money. Spotify's Boo, Spotify, they're so evil to their artists. So I applaud anybody who has the means to and is able to support elsewhere. It's so helpful. Obviously, everybody's in a different financial situation. So just honestly supporting artists by commenting on their posts and watching their videos on YouTube and just sending a nice message occasionally is so lovely. And all the ways that you support are so welcome and so wonderful. So thank you.
Yeah, there are a lot of free ways that you can support your favorite artists that don't cost you anything. And obviously, if you're going to buy
Mhm.
the music, buy it directly from the artist whenever possible. Go to a show, buy some merchandise. These are all things that you can do to help. And because we don't live in the era that we used to live in, where people sold hundreds of thousands of records, and you could make some money off the record sales, and it's all like touring and merch is what they say.
Yeah, and touring's becoming more and more expensive, which is so sad. So I think in the coming years, until things start to change, I think people will be touring less too, which is sad.
Yeah. Maiah Wynne, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I'm personally sorry that there was so much pain involved in your past that led to this wonderful record, but I'm glad that you channeled it in a way that you could share it and come through the other side in a better place and share the beauty of that journey with everybody. Thank you so much for this. I hope it does really well for you, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon again in the future.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was so good talking with you again. You're lovely.